"Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," the CEO said, loud enough for the donors to laugh, eyes sliding over the janitor's coveralls like they were a joke. Careful," someone added, snickering. "He might mop the sky on the way up." The words landed sharp and public. A dare wrapped in silk cruelty, cameras already angling closer. He didn't smile, he didn't bristle. He just looked past her, listening to the blades beginning their idle thrum, the sound not quite right. "By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below." The laughter swelled, champagne glasses clinking, heels clicking on polished concrete as if the hangar itself approved. She tilted her head, satisfied, power radiating from a tailored suit that cost more than his car. The crowd expected a flinch, a muttered apology, a retreat back to the shadows where labor belonged. Instead, he stepped aside with a calm that felt out of place, hands folding around a rag still warm from friction, eyes tracking the aircraft like it was a living thing. Didn't they see the quiet calculation? They didn't hear what he heard beneath the noise. They just saw a janitor who knew his place, or so they thought. This wasn't a story about a joke gone too far. It was about how quickly laughter dies when truth starts moving. He was Idris Cole, and tonight he was supposed to be invisible. The snapback came without heat. He finished his sweep, nudged a cone back into alignment, and nodded to the ground crew with the same courtesy he offered everyone. Calm sat on him like a well-worn jacket, unshakable, earned. When someone barked at him to clear the area, he complied, stepping into the labor corridor where the lights buzzed and the floor bore the scars of real work. He didn't look back at Aurelia Voss, the woman who ran towers and headlines, because looking back never helped anyone land safely. What grounded him was waiting at home. A small kitchen with a crooked chair leg he kept meaning to fix. A lunch packed with care and a note folded twice because it mattered. A daughter who trusted him to show up every morning, no excuses. He'd chosen nights because nights were quieter, because quiet let him keep his past buried and his promises intact. The job paid enough. The silence cost him less than the sky once had. The hangar doors yawned open and the helicopter rolled forward, engines rising from a whisper to a confident snarl. Donors gathered near the rope line, phones lifted, a charity banner fluttering in the wash. Aurelia stood at the edge of it all, chin lifted, rehearsing sound bites in her head. Her niece, Marin, climbed aboard with a grin that flickered toward nerves. Someone snapped another photo. The smell of fuel mixed with citrus cologne. Idris felt the vibration through his boots and paused. It wasn't dramatic, just a hitch, a fractional lag as the rotor reached for harmony and missed by a breath. He closed his eyes for half a second, counting, then opened them. The sound didn't settle. It argued with itself. He set the rag down, heart steady, and watched the pilot compensate, overcorrect, settle again. "Clear the deck," a supervisor shouted, authority bouncing off steel. Idris moved, but his gaze stayed fixed on the tail, on the shimmer where heat blurred lines that should have been clean. He tasted metal. His chest tightened with an old, familiar focus. He remembered hands on controls, the way panic lies to you, the way machines tell the truth if you listen. The helicopter lifted. Applause broke out, thin and eager. Aurelia waved, already turning to greet a reporter. The craft yawed a degree too far, corrected, yawed back. Idris's jaw set. He stepped toward the line, then stopped himself. A janitor crossing ropes never ends well. He breathed out through his nose, slow, grounding the impulse. Marin's face pressed to the window, excitement cutting through fear. He saw his own kid in that look, the trust. The blades bit the air harder, the pitch climbing. The sound sharpened, a warning dressed up as confidence. Idris's pulse stayed even. He'd seen worse. He'd fixed worse. But not from here. Not without permission that never came. Aurelia laughed at something said behind her, a hand dismissing the sky as if it obeyed her schedule. Cameras caught the gesture. The crowd leaned into the spectacle. Idris leaned into the truth, humming through the concrete, into the knowledge that money couldn't tune a rotor and power couldn't coax a sensor back online. The helicopter banked, just a hair, then steadied, for now. He wiped his hands on his coveralls and waited, positioned where power never looked, listening as the machine told him exactly how much time they had left. The sound followed him as he walked the labor corridor, a thin vibration that threaded through steel and bone. Idris didn't rush. Rushing made mistakes louder. He counted steps, let the echo of the blades fade into something he could dissect, and pushed through the side door into the cooler night air behind the hangar. The wind carried fuel and salt from the nearby water, familiar enough to steady him. He leaned against the wall, eyes half-lidded, replaying the hitch in the climb. Not catastrophic, not yet. The kind of problem that waited for arrogance to look away before it showed its teeth. He flexed his fingers, feeling the old stiffness in his knuckles, the memory of controls that vibrated just like that when a sensor lied. Somewhere above, a machine was pretending to be fine. A radio crackled nearby. Ground crew chatter overlapped, all confidence and protocol. Idris listened without being seen, nodding once as if someone had asked his opinion. He didn't need to announce himself. Machines never cared who you were, only whether you listened. He clocked out on time. That mattered. Promises mattered. He washed his hands at the sink that never quite drained, scrubbing oil from the lines like they were evidence. The mirror showed a man with tired eyes and a calm mouth, a uniform that made people think they knew his story. He shut off the tap and headed for the bus stop, the night swallowing the hangar's glow. Home was 3 stops and a short walk. He let the city's hum replace the rotor's whine, let ordinary sounds take over. The apartment door stuck like always. Inside, the quiet was the good kind. He set his boots by the mat, toes lined up, and moved through the kitchen on memory. A note waited on the counter, folded twice. He didn't open it yet. He warmed leftovers, checked the chair leg, tightened the screw a quarter turn. Small fixes added up. He finally unfolded the note. A smile tugged at him despite himself. Tomorrow's spelling test. A doodle of a helicopter with crooked blades and a stick figure waving. He exhaled, slow. He had traded sky for mornings like this and never regretted it. His phone buzzed. A local news alert slid across the screen. Photos from the charity event already circulating. He didn't tap it. Fame had a way of finding you if you let it. He set the phone face down and ate standing up, mind drifting back to the hitch, the yaw, the shimmer. He pictured Marin's face at the window and forced the image away. Worry without action was just noise. Sleep came light. He woke before dawn, the vibration back in his bones like an alarm. He dressed quietly, packed a lunch, left another note on the counter with a reminder about the test, and a heart drawn clumsily. Outside, the sky was low and gray, the kind of morning that pressed down on the city. At the terminal, the hangar buzzed louder than usual. News vans idled. A supervisor paced with a tablet, jaw tight. Idris took his place where he was supposed to be, mop bucket rolling obediently at his side. He listened. The helicopter had landed overnight without incident. A scheduled inspection had been moved up. Optics, someone muttered. Optics mattered more than answers. Aurelia Voss arrived surrounded by aides, her confidence intact, her laughter polished. She didn't look at him. That was fine. Power liked clean lines and simple stories. He worked the edge of the floor, eyes flicking to the tail assembly, the panel seams. He noticed a fresh scuff that didn't belong. He paused, then kept moving. "Hey," a younger mechanic whispered as Idris passed, voice low. "You hear that yesterday?" Sounded off. Idris met his eyes for half a beat and nodded. Nothing more. The kid swallowed and looked away, reassured by being seen. Reputation leaked like that sometimes, in glances and pauses. The inspection team gathered, clipboards, cameras. The rotor spun again, slow, deliberate. Idris felt it in his teeth. The hitch was still there, buried deeper now, masked by adjustments that treated symptoms. He tightened his grip on the mop handle and waited. By the way, if stories about quiet skill and overlooked people hit you where you live, subscribe and stick around. There's more beneath the surface here than a charity flight. A reporter laughed at something off camera. Aurelia's hand lifted, dismissive, already crafting the narrative. The machine complied for the moment, lifting clean, the crowd relaxing. Idris counted anyway. 1, 2, 3. On 4, the sound wavered, subtle enough to fool anyone listening for applause. He stepped back into the shadow of the service corridor, positioned where power never looked, and watched the helicopter climb into a sky that didn't care about status. The truth hummed louder now, insistent. He checked his watch. Time was thinning. The helicopter climbed into the low gray, the sound thinning as distance swallowed detail, and Idris stayed where he was, counting under his breath. The truth hummed louder than applause. A thin wire stretched tight. Time was thinning too, the kind that frays quietly before it snaps. Inside the hangar, the mood shifted from celebration to choreography. Aides clustered, clipboards moved. Aurelia's smile held, polished and unbothered, as if gravity itself answered to her schedule. "Let's keep this clean," she said, voice carrying without effort. "We're not inventing problems today." Heads nodded. Cameras followed her, not the sky. Idris pushed the mop along the edge of the floor, water whispering against concrete. He listened to radios bleed, confidence. Telemetry's green. Compensation within tolerance. He heard what they didn't say. He smelled hot metal under citrus cologne. He watched heat shimmer where it shouldn't, a mirage that lied prettily. "Hey," the younger mechanic murmured again when Idris passed, eyes darting. "You always hear stuff like that?" Idris shrugged, barely there. "Machines talk," he said. "Most people don't listen." He kept moving. A supervisor intercepted him near the service corridor, irritation already loaded. "We need that lane clear, optics." "On it," Idris replied, calm, stepping into the narrow passage where lights buzzed and paint peeled. Power never looked here. He paused, palm resting on cool steel, and closed his eyes for a beat. The sound threaded through the structure, a fractional lag between promise and reality. He exhaled. In the corridor, voices leaked from a half-open door. Operations. Tension sharpened syllables. "She wants another pass for the press. We've adjusted." "It's fine." Fine was a lie people told themselves when they didn't want to slow down. Idris moved a cone back into place and drifted closer, not eavesdropping so much as existing where sound pooled. A different voice cut through, older, quieter. "You know who used to fly that bird?" A pause. "Back when the tail assembly was retrofitted?" Someone scoffed. "Who?" "The janitor," the voice said. "Different name, then." "Different uniform." A beat. Guy kept everyone alive when the sensors went blind. A laugh followed, brittle. "Sure." Idris kept his eyes on the floor. Reputation leaked like that sometimes, never where it mattered, always too early or too late. He rolled the bucket away as if nothing had been said. Outside, the helicopter banked for the pass. The crowd leaned in again. Aurelia lifted a hand, practiced ease, her words catching the wind. See? Perfect. Cameras drank it up. The sound wavered on 4. Idris stopped, not because he meant to, but because his body did. He counted again, felt the vibration climb his boots. The pilot corrected. The machine complied, then argued. Idris's jaw tightened. He scanned the perimeter, cataloging exits, distances, the angle of the runway. Old maps overlaid the present. Aurelia's aide brushed past him. Clipped. You're in the shot. I'll move, Idris said, stepping back into shadow. He watched Marin's face flash in the window as the helicopter dipped, then steadied. He swallowed. He thought of a lunch note folded twice. The reporter's laugh rang too loud. Thrilling, someone shouted. Idris heard fear under it, a tremor no microphone would pick up. He leaned toward the corridor again, voice low. It's not settled. The supervisor snapped. We don't need commentary. Idris nodded. Then you need listening. He didn't push. Pushing got people hurt. The helicopter completed the pass and climbed, applause following like a tide. The sound thinned again, the hitch masked by distance. Idris's watch ticked. He checked it, then the sky, then the scuffed panel seam he'd noticed earlier, the one that told a story if you knew the language. Hey, the younger mechanic whispered closer now, breath shallow. If you hear something, you'll tell us, right? Idris met his eyes. I already did, he said gently. You just didn't like the answer. He placed the mop against the wall and straightened, posture shifting a degree. Calm didn't mean still. Aurelia turned, irritation flickering as she caught sight of him near the corridor. Why is he still here? She asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Clear the deck. On it, someone said, too fast. Idris stepped back where power never looked, listening as the machine circled for another pass. The truth hummed louder now, impatient. He counted anyway. 1, 2, 3. On 4, the sound slipped. Unmistakable this time, and a hush rippled through the crowd like a held breath. Silence spread faster than applause. A collective inhale that froze hands mid-clap and cameras mid-focus. Idris felt it before anyone named it, the hitch surfacing like a skipped heartbeat. The helicopter wobbled, corrected, wobbled again, and the sound on 4 refused to lie. Hold positions, someone said into a radio, too brightly. Another voice overlapped, strained. Telemetry's jittering. Aurelia's smile tightened, a practiced crease at the corner of her mouth. It's wind, she said, projecting certainty toward the lenses. We planned for this. She didn't look at the sky, she looked at the crowd. Idris stepped closer to the rope line, then stopped, palms open at his sides. He watched the tail, the shimmer, the way heat smeared lines that should have stayed clean. The machine was arguing now, a conversation turning sharp. He tasted metal again. A supervisor blocked him. Chest puffed with borrowed authority. You're not cleared. I'm listening, Idris said. You should too. The man scoffed, eyes flicking to Aurelia. Clear the deck. Idris retreated a step, not in defeat, but to the place where sound pooled. He counted. 1, 2, 3. On 4, the rotor note dipped, deeper than before. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone gasped. In the operations room, screens bloomed with data. A line spiked, dipped, spiked again. Compensations maxed, an engineer said, voice thinning. We're chasing it. Bring it in, another urged. Not yet, Aurelia said from the doorway, presence bending the room. We can't spook them. Idris's voice cut through the open door, calm and unwanted. You're already late. Heads turned. Surprise flared, then irritation. Who let him? Listen, Idris said, raising a hand. Not to command, but to focus. You've got a sensor lying to you. Tail yaws overcorrecting. If you push another pass... Aurelia stepped forward, eyes cold. This isn't your place. Idris met her gaze, steady. The machine doesn't care about place. She laughed, sharp. Security. 2 guards shifted. Idris didn't move. He kept counting. The helicopter banked, sharper now, the correction lagging a fraction too long. Marin's face flashed at the window, fear cutting through the bravado. Idris's chest tightened. A guard touched his elbow. Sir! Idris shook his head once. Give me 30 seconds. Out, the supervisor snapped. The helicopter dipped. A scream tore from the crowd, raw and real. Radios erupted. Yaw, instability. Pilots fighting it. Altitude dropping. Aurelia's certainty cracked just a hair. What's happening? Idris stepped past the guard as if the space had opened for him. No one stopped him this time. He spoke without raising his voice. Kill the extra pass. Bring it straight in. Reduce collective, ease the tail, don't chase the ghost. Who is that? Someone demanded. The only person listening, the younger mechanic said, barely audible. The pilot's voice came through, tight. Controls feel delayed. Because they are, Idris said, eyes never leaving the sky. Trust the count. On 4, ease. On 6, hold. Aurelia stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. You're guessing. I'm counting, Idris replied. The helicopter steadied for a breath, then lurched harder. The sound on 4 broke, ugly now. Alarms flared in the ops room. A red light blinked, insistent. Fuel imbalance, someone shouted. Idris shook his head. Secondary effect, you're bleeding confidence into a liar. Aurelia swallowed. The crowd pressed back as security widened the perimeter. Cameras kept rolling. Fix it, she said, voice low. Now. Idris looked at her finally. Let me work. She hesitated, power warring with reality. The helicopter dropped another foot. The crowd cried out as one. Aurelia nodded, sharp and unwilling. Idris lifted the radio, hand steady. Pilot, listen to me. Static hissed, then steadied, the pilot breathing loud enough to count with. Idris anchored himself to the sound, blocking out the crowd and lights. The woman beside him reduced to a blinking red dot. We're going to ride the truth, he said, voice even. On my count. The helicopter shuddered, nose dipping, then catching. The tail swung wider, a warning arc that drew another wave of cries. Idris lifted his free hand, palm open, fingers ticking the air. 1, 2, 3. The 4th beat came ugly again, a cough in the rhythm that made his teeth ache. In the ops room, data streamed, desperate to be believed. Idris watched the sky instead. Aurelia silenced her buzzing phone without looking. Her gaze stayed locked on the aircraft now, not the crowd, and the cameras caught that shift. Fix it, she said again, quieter. Altitude stabilizing, the pilot said, surprise breaking through fear. For now, Idris replied. We're not done. The helicopter edged closer, lower, the sound thickening as it bled into the hangar's bones. Idris felt the countdown tighten and leaned into it, steady as the floor beneath him, ready to finish what the machine had started. The helicopter hovered lower, the sound thick and strained. Blades chewing the air like it owed them something. Idris kept his eyes on the machine, not the screens, not the faces frozen around him. He felt the vibration through the concrete now, a living pulse that matched his count. "Altitude's holding," the pilot said, disbelief edged with hope. "Because you stopped fighting it," Idris replied. "Don't get excited. We've only slowed the argument." Inside the operations room, engineers crowded the monitors, hands hovering uselessly over controls they didn't trust anymore. One of them whispered, "How does he know that?" No one answered. Aurelia stood a step behind Idris, her presence suddenly smaller without the armor of certainty. The wind tugged at her hair, cameras catching every flicker of strain she couldn't smooth away. "What do you need?" she asked, the words clipped. Pride pared down to necessity. "Space," Idris said, and silence. She hesitated for half a breath, then snapped her fingers. "Clear it." Security waved people back. The rope line widened. The hangar swallowed the noise until only the helicopter remained, loud and unforgiving. Idris lifted the radio again. "Pilot, you're doing fine. I need you to trust the count and ignore the alarms unless I tell you otherwise." "That's against protocol," the pilot said. "So is pretending everything's fine," Idris answered calmly. "Protocols are written for calm days." A pause. Then, copy. The machine dipped again, sharper this time, tail yaw swinging wide. A gasp tore through the remaining crowd. Idris didn't flinch. He counted. 1, 2, 3. On 4, he raised his hand. "Ease." The pilot obeyed. The helicopter steadied, shuddering, but alive. In the ops room, a senior engineer shook his head. "The sensor's feeding bad data. We should shut it down." "You shut it down now, you blind the pilot," Idris said without turning. "You want to blind someone in a storm?" Silence answered him. The younger mechanic edged closer, eyes wide. "How do we fix it?" "We don't," Idris said. "We work around it." Aurelia stared at him. "That's it? You just work around it?" "That's what flying is," Idris replied. "Problem-solving at speed." Another alarm blared, shrill and insistent. The pilot cursed under his breath. Idris felt the machine push back, harder now, impatient. Sweat traced his spine, but his voice stayed level. "You're going to feel a lag. Don't chase it. Let it come to you." The helicopter dropped a foot, then another. Idris's jaw tightened. "On 6, he said. "Hold." The pilot held. The machine groaned, then complied, the sound smoothing just enough to breathe. "Descent rate stabilizing," someone called out, stunned. Idris nodded once. "Good, now we keep it boring." Aurelia's phone buzzed again. She ignored it. The cameras captured that too, the CEO choosing not to perform. Her gaze flicked to Marin's face in the window, fear naked now. "Get her down," Aurelia said, the order stripped of theater. "That's the plan," Idris replied. Time stretched. Each second demanded attention. Idris kept counting, fingers ticking the air like a metronome only he could hear. The helicopter crept closer to the ground, the hangar lights reflecting off its belly in broken lines. The crowd's fear softened into a taut hope. "If you're still with me here, subscribe and stay." Stories like this don't rush the truth, they earn it. The landing skids kissed the air above the concrete, hovering, trembling. Idris's breath slowed, matching the machine. "Easy," he murmured, not into the radio but to the helicopter itself. "Easy." A gust shoved the tail. The machine lurched, a scream cut the air. Idris snapped his hand up. "Counter now, trust me." The pilot obeyed, hands steady despite everything. The helicopter corrected, the argument easing into a grudging truce. "Skids down," the pilot said, voice breaking. "Hold," Idris said. "Hold until it stops lying." The rotors screamed, then began to settle, the pitch lowering, the vibration easing from a snarl to a growl. Idris counted past the urge to celebrate. 1, 2, 3. On 4, the sound didn't break. "Powering down," the pilot said, wonder threading his words. The blades slowed. The helicopter sagged fully onto the concrete, alive and grounded. The hangar exhaled as one. Someone sobbed, someone laughed hysterically. Idris lowered his hand and finally let himself breathe. Aurelia stared at the grounded machine, then at him. The cameras caught her swallowing. "Who are you?" she asked, the question raw and unguarded. Idris didn't answer yet. He looked up at the cockpit window as Marin pressed her forehead to the glass, eyes wide, alive. He lifted a hand in a small wave. She waved back, tentative, then grinning through tears. Only then did Idris turn back to the hangar, to the eyes finally seeing him, knowing this wasn't the end. Just the moment the truth refused to stay quiet anymore. The rotors wound down with a long, reluctant sigh, the sound flattening into silence that felt heavier than noise. Idris stood still until the last vibration drained out of the concrete, until the machine stopped pretending and told the truth by being quiet. Only then did he lower the radio. The hangar didn't know what to do with itself. People hovered at the edges of motion, hands half raised, mouths open, eyes darting between the helicopter and the man who'd spoken it down. Cameras adjusted, hunting for a script that hadn't been written. Someone started to clap, stopped, started again. It didn't catch. Aurelia took a step forward, heels clicking too loud in the hush. Her face held 1,000 calculations, all of them failing to land on the right one. "Open it," she said, voice firming by habit. The cockpit door swung out. The pilot climbed down on unsteady legs, helmet coming off, eyes glassy with adrenaline. He didn't look at the ops team first. He looked at Idris. "You saved us," he said, simple and unvarnished. Idris shook his head. "You flew it." The pilot swallowed, nodded, then turned back toward the cockpit. "Marin," he said softly. The girl emerged wrapped in a blanket, fear still clinging to her like static. Aurelia reached her in 3 strides, pulling her close, the CEO's armor cracking as a sob escaped despite her best effort. Cameras caught it all. The crowd murmured, a tide shifting. Idris stepped back, making room. This part wasn't his. He watched from the edge as medics arrived, hands gentle, voices low. He tracked the helicopter with a professional's eye even now, noting the scuffed panel seam, the faint smell of overheated wiring. He filed it away. Later mattered too. A senior engineer approached, face pale. "You were right," he said, not meeting Idris's eyes. "The tail yaw sensor. It was feeding us garbage." Idris nodded. "It happens. How did you—" The man stopped, shook his head. "Never mind." Aurelia turned. Marin still clutched to her side. She took Idris in properly for the first time, not as a uniform, but as a presence. "You knew," she said, not a question. "I listened," Idris replied. "That wasn't listening," she said, frustration bleeding through awe. "That was expertise." He didn't answer. He glanced at the younger mechanic hovering nearby, at the ops room full of shaken professionals. He glanced at the cameras that had found him now, lenses hungry. Power had finally looked. A reporter broke the line, voice eager. "Sir, can you tell us your name, your role here?" Aurelia lifted a hand, automatic, to control the narrative. Then she stopped herself. Her hand dropped. "Answer him," she said, quiet. Idris felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. He exhaled. "I cleaned the hangar," he said. "Tonight that was enough." The reporter blinked. But you directed an emergency landing. Idris met the lens, steady. I've flown worse days than this. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers sparked. Someone said, "He flew?" Another, "I heard he used to." Aurelia closed the distance between them, voice low, so only those nearest heard. "What did I miss?" she asked, the edge gone, replaced by something like humility and something like fear. Idris held her gaze. A lot. Her jaw tightened, then eased. "What are you?" He considered the question. The hangar, the city beyond. "A dad," he said, "a worker, and once a pilot." Cameras clicked faster. The reporter leaned in. "Once?" Idris nodded. "Once is enough." Aurelia straightened, turning to the crowd, the press, the staff. Her voice carried, stripped of polish. "This event is over," she said, "effective immediately." Murmurs surged. "And we're grounding the fleet until every system tells the truth." Someone protested. She cut them off with a look. "No exceptions." She turned back to Idris. "You shouldn't have been invisible," she said, the admission costing her. "You shouldn't have been mocked." A beat. The hangar held it. "I'm sorry." The word landed heavy. Cameras drank it in. The donors shifted, uncomfortable now, reassessing the joke they'd laughed at. The power imbalance tipped, not dramatically, but undeniably. Idris didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He nodded once. "Good," he said. "Now fix the rest." Aurelia huffed a short laugh. Startled despite herself. "You're not asking for anything?" He thought of a crooked chair leg, a folded note, a kid who trusted him. "I already have what I need," he said. "But they don't." He nodded toward the staff, the labor corridor beyond. "See them." She followed his gaze. The cameras followed hers. "I will," she said. As the crowd began to thin, as medics guided Marin away and engineers swarmed the grounded helicopter, Idris stepped back into shadow by habit. But the shadow didn't fit the same way anymore. Eyes tracked him now, measuring, recalibrating. He picked up his mop, fingers closing around the handle like an old friend. The work wasn't done. Neither was the reckoning. The hangar began to breathe again, movement returning in cautious increments. Engineers clustered around the helicopter, voices low and technical now, hands tracing seams with new respect. Medics guided Marin toward a waiting ambulance, her blanket trailing like a flag of surrender. Idris watched until the doors closed, until the red lights flickered once and went steady. Only then did the weight in his chest ease. Aurelia lingered where the crowd had thinned, heels planted, shoulders squared, as if bracing against a wind only she could feel. Her aides hovered at a distance, unsure which version of her they were allowed to approach. Cameras remained, lenses curious rather than predatory now, waiting to see what power did when it had been corrected. Idris turned toward the labor corridor, mop still in hand. Habit pulled him that way. Finish the shift, leave quietly, let the truth settle without him stirring it. "Wait," Aurelia said. The word wasn't sharp. It surprised him enough that he stopped. She crossed the concrete, each step measured, eyes never leaving his face. Up close, the Polish couldn't hide the fatigue carved beneath it. "You're walking away," she said. "I'm done here," Idris replied. "No," she said, then corrected herself. "Not like that." He waited. Silence stretched, unfamiliar ground for both of them. "You didn't take credit," Aurelia said finally. "You didn't ask for anything. People like me don't understand that." Idris tilted his head slightly. "People like you don't need to." Her mouth twitched, a reflex she didn't quite manage to control. "You could have humiliated me," she said, "in front of everyone. That wouldn't land the helicopter, Idris replied. A murmur rippled nearby as a reporter whispered into a phone, already reframing the narrative. Idris felt the pull of attention again, uncomfortable as heat on skin. He shifted his grip on the mop handle, grounding himself in its familiar weight. Aurelia followed the movement, eyes flicking down, then back up. They laughed, she said quietly. I laughed. Idris didn't answer. He didn't need to. She inhaled, slow. I built my life on being right, she continued, on believing that authority meant competence. Her gaze slid toward the helicopter, now swarmed by people who'd deferred to her minutes earlier. Tonight, authority almost got someone killed. Idris's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with agreement. Authority needs limits. So do egos, she said, the admission costing her another breath. An aide approached, tentative. Miss Voss, the board, not now, Aurelia said, without looking away from Idris. The aide froze, then retreated. Cameras caught that too. Idris glanced toward the exit, imagining the bus stop, the quiet ride home, the note on the counter waiting for him to add another line in the morning. He imagined explaining the news alert to his daughter before she asked. He imagined her eyes widening, then narrowing, proud and worried all at once. You should go, Aurelia said, following his gaze. Your shift's over. It was over an hour ago, Idris replied. She nodded, absorbing that. Will you come back? The question hung there, heavier than it sounded. He considered it, not in terms of status or money, but time, mornings, promises. I work nights, he said. That won't change. I can make space, she said quickly, then slower, catching herself. We can make space. Idris met her eyes. Start by listening. Aurelia held the gaze, then nodded once, sharp and sincere. I will. The younger mechanic hovered nearby, hands shoved into his pockets, awe warring with nerves. Hey, he said to Idris, voice low. Thanks. Idris smiled, just barely. Keep listening. As Idris turned away again, a reporter called out, Sir, what should we call you? He paused at the edge of the corridor, the place where sound pooled and power faded. He didn't turn around. Call me the guy who heard it, he said. He stepped into the corridor, lights buzzing overhead, the familiar comfort of invisibility tugging at him. But it didn't hold. Footsteps echoed behind him, tentative. Aurelia stopped at the threshold, not crossing. She looked smaller here, framed by peeling paint and exposed conduit. I meant what I said, she told him, about seeing them. Idris nodded. Do it when the cameras are gone. She flinched, then smiled, rueful. Fair. He continued down the corridor, mop wheels rattling softly. The sounds of the hangar faded, replaced by the hum of workspaces that never made headlines. He breathed easier there, the truth quieter now, no longer urgent. Outside, the night had deepened. News vans still idled, reporters still talking, but the sky above was steady, indifferent. Idris headed for the bus stop, shoulders loose for the first time since the blades spun up. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She's okay. Asked about you. He stopped under a flickering streetlight, thumb hovering, then typed back a simple reply. Good. As the bus pulled up, doors hissing open, Idris stepped aboard, carrying with him the echo of a machine brought home, and the knowledge that some reckonings didn't end when the noise stopped. The bus hissed away from the curb, leaving Idris under the flickering streetlight with the city settling back into itself. He stood for a moment longer than necessary, letting the quiet press in, letting the truth lose its edge. Then he walked the rest of the way home, keys warm in his palm. Inside, the apartment greeted him with the soft clutter of life lived carefully. He set his boots by the mat, washed his hands, and checked the chair leg again out of habit. It held. He allowed himself a small nod and moved to the counter where a new note waited, unfolded this time. A reminder about practice after school. A question mark drawn too big. He smiled, wrote a brief answer, and stuck it to the fridge. Sleep came easier, but it didn't last. He woke before dawn to the phantom echo of rotors, then to his phone lighting the room. A message from the younger mechanic, hesitant and earnest. They're grounding everything. Full review, they asked about you. Idris set the phone down without replying. The city could ask. He'd decide what to give. Morning brought the usual choreography. Breakfast, backpacks, a walk to school. He listened as his daughter talked about spelling words and a new game at recess, her voice steadying him more than any quiet ever had. At the gate, she hugged him tight, then pulled back to study his face. "You look tired," she said. "Long night," he replied. "Did you fix something?" He paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I did." She grinned, satisfied, and ran off. Idris watched until she disappeared into the building, then turned back toward the street, shoulders light. The news caught up with him anyway. Screens in the bodega looped footage of the landing, the wobble, the silence. A headline scrolled about humility and heroes, about listening. He paid, nodded to the owner, and stepped back outside before the loop reached the joke again. At the terminal, the mood had changed. People looked up when he passed, then away, unsure of the rules. The labor corridor hummed as always, but voices softened, pauses longer. He worked his route, mop gliding, ears open. Machines told calmer stories today. Aurelia arrived without an entourage, hair pulled back, suit replaced by something simpler. She didn't announce herself. She found Idris where the corridor met the hangar and waited until he finished a pass. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," he replied. "I meant what I said," she continued. "We're starting with listening." She gestured toward a small conference room, door open, no cameras. "I want you there, not to perform, to advise." Idris considered the doorway, the time, the promises folded into his day. "After school pickup," he said. She nodded. "Of course." They stood there, awkward and honest. "For what it's worth," she added, "the board is nervous." "They should be," Idris said. A hint of a smile crossed her face. "Fair." He returned to his work. The day unfolded without drama, which felt like progress. When he left, the city was bright, the bus crowded with ordinary lives. He rode home, thinking about counts and chairs and the way power shifted when it learned to be quiet. That evening, he sat at the small table helping with homework, listening to a recitation of spelling words that ended in laughter. The phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. "Tomorrow, then," the message read. "Tomorrow," he replied. "If you're still here, subscribe and stay with this one. The loud part's over, but the real work is just starting." Night fell. Idris packed a lunch, folded a note, and set his alarm. He stood by the window for a moment, watching traffic stitch the city together. Somewhere, machines rested, grounded and honest. Somewhere else, egos recalibrated. At the terminal the next night, the conference room filled slowly. Engineers, supervisors, mechanics. Faces that had learned something they couldn't unlearn. Aurelia took a seat at the end, not the head. She gestured for Idris to start. He didn't lecture, he asked questions. He listened. He pointed out seams and sounds. The places where truth hid. Heads nodded. Notes filled pages. The room changed shape around the work. When it ended, Aurelia stood. "This is how we do it," she said. Not to cameras, not to donors, but to the people who kept things flying. Together. Idris gathered his things. He had a bus to catch, a promise to keep. As he stepped back into the corridor where power never looked, he felt the shift lock in, quiet and durable, like a machine finely tuned to tell the truth. The meeting dissolved without applause, chairs scraping softly as people returned to their work with a different weight in their steps. Idris slipped back into the corridor, mop in hand, the familiar rhythm grounding him. The shift had changed, but the work hadn't. That mattered. Word traveled anyway, not as headlines this time, but as glances and pauses. Engineers asked before adjusting. Supervisors listened before speaking. The younger mechanic caught Idris's eye and nodded, a silent thanks that didn't ask for anything back. Idris nodded once in return and kept moving. The helicopter stayed grounded, panels open like ribs, wires exposed to honest air. Idris paused beside it, eyes tracing the seam that had lied so convincingly. He didn't touch it. Not yet. He listened. Machines, when quiet, told better stories. Aurelia watched from a distance, arms folded, not as a commander, but as a student. She didn't interrupt. She didn't perform. When someone disagreed with her, she let it stand until it found its footing. It was an adjustment, visible and awkward, but real. Later, she approached Idris with a folder held loosely, not presented like an offering. "We've got auditors coming," she said. "External, they'll ask questions." "They should," Idris replied. "They'll ask about you," she added. He met her gaze. "Then tell them the truth." She nodded. "I plan to." The day wore on, punctuated by small victories. A faulty gauge replaced, a checklist rewritten, a protocol amended to include listening, not just reading. Idris clocked out on time, as promised, and caught the bus with a sense of rightness that surprised him. At home, dinner steamed on the table, laughter bouncing off walls that held together despite their flaws. Idris listened to stories about recess and spelling tests, about a friend who'd tripped and a teacher who'd smiled anyway. He nodded in the right places, present. After bedtime, he sat at the small table and opened the folder Aurelia had slipped into his bag when he wasn't looking. It wasn't a contract. It was a proposal. Hours defined, nights respected, mornings protected. Advisory, temporary, optional. He closed it without deciding. Sleep came deep. He woke to quiet confidence instead of echoes. The next night, the terminal felt steadier. The auditors arrived, serious and sharp. Idris stayed in the background, answering when asked, refusing to grandstand. When a question skirted comfort, he leaned into it. Truth liked pressure. A reporter tried to corner him near the rope line. "You're the janitor who landed a helicopter," she said, smile practiced. "I didn't land anything," Idris replied. "I listened." She blinked. "That's not a great headline." "It's a better lesson," he said, and walked away. In the ops room, a debate flared over budgets and timelines. Aurelia listened, then deferred to a mechanic with grease under his nails. Cameras weren't there to catch it. That mattered more. Idris felt the victory take shape not as a moment, but as a habit. Public exposure had done its work. Now it needed maintenance. He kept listening, kept counting, kept returning to the corridor when the noise rose. A message buzzed on his phone during a lull. "Marin wants to say thanks." A photo followed, crayon lines forming a helicopter, this one with straight blades and a small figure on the ground waving. Idris smiled, then typed back. "Tell her she did great." Aurelia approached later, eyes softer than they'd been. I owe you, she said. You don't, Idris replied. Just keep it grounded. She laughed, a real one this time. You ever miss it? She asked, nodding toward the sky beyond the glass. Sometimes, he said, but I don't miss what it cost. She considered that, then extended the folder again. No rush. Idris took it, not as acceptance but as trust. I'll read it, he said. Outside, rain tapped the windows, a steady percussion that reminded him of counts done right. He finished his shift, rode the bus, and walked the last block under a clearing sky. At the apartment door, he paused, listening to the quiet inside. He stepped in, set his boots by the mat, and checked the chair leg. It held. Later, as he folded a note and set it on the counter, Idris realized the reversal wasn't about who he'd been or who she was becoming. It was about the room they'd made together, where truth could land without applause and stay put. Tomorrow, he would decide. Tonight, it was enough to know the machine was honest again, and so was the world around it. The decision waited with the patience of something that didn't need him to rush. Idris woke before dawn, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the fridge and distant traffic. He brewed coffee, folded a note, and sat at the small table with the folder unopened beside his mug. The city outside held its breath in that gray hour when promises felt possible. He walked his daughter to school, listened to her plans, nodded at the right moments. At the gate she hugged him, then paused. Are you fixing more things tonight? She asked. Maybe, he said, but I'll be home. She smiled, satisfied, and ran off. Idris watched until she vanished into the building, then turned toward the terminal with the folder tucked under his arm like a book he wasn't sure he wanted to read. At the hangar, the helicopter gleamed under work lights, panels closed, seams honest. Engineers moved with purpose, calling out checks that sounded calmer now, less performative. Idris took his place along the corridor, mop gliding, ears open. The machine's silence felt right. Aurelia arrived mid-morning, alone again, carrying 2 coffees. She stopped a respectful distance away. I didn't know how you'd take it, she said, offering one. He accepted. Thanks. They stood there, not rushing the conversation. Finally, she nodded at the folder. Have you read it? I will, Idris said. She smiled, small and real. That's all I asked. The auditors wrapped their review with fewer notes than expected. A press release went out without his name leading it. The narrative focused on process, not heroics. Idris approved without being asked. It felt like progress. Later, in the conference room, Aurelia took a seat with everyone else. Before we close, she said, I want to acknowledge the people who work where we don't look. She gestured toward the corridor. They saved us. Applause followed, restrained and thoughtful. Idris stayed out of sight, listening as the sound rose and settled without demanding him. That mattered. He clocked out on time. On the bus, he opened the folder and read every line. It was fair. It respected nights and mornings. It offered a voice without demanding a mask. Advisory, not command. Temporary, renewable by choice. He closed it again, feeling the edges align. At home, dinner steamed, laughter filled the kitchen, and the chair leg held. After bedtime, Idris sat at the table and wrote a response. Short, clear, conditional. He slipped it back into the folder. The next night, he handed it to Aurelia without ceremony. She read it once, then again, eyes lifting to meet his. You'll say no if it costs too much, she said. Yes, Idris replied. She nodded. Good. Work resumed with a steadiness that felt earned. The helicopter flew again days later, quiet and true, without banners or cameras. Idris listened from the corridor and smiled when the sound on 4 stayed clean. A reporter tried once more. Idris declined. The story had moved on to systems and safety. That was fine. On a Friday afternoon, a crayon drawing waited on the counter. Straight blades, a small figure waving. Idris pinned it to the fridge and packed lunches for Monday. At the terminal, Aurelia walked the labor corridor for the first time, not as a tour, but as a habit. She asked names, she wrote them down, the cameras were elsewhere. Idris felt the victory settle, not as a peak but as a baseline. Public exposure had done its work, poetic justice had inverted the joke. Now the dignity remained, durable and quiet. He rode the bus home under a clear sky, the city stitched together by lights and ordinary lives. At the apartment door, he paused, listening to the peace inside. He stepped in, boots by the mat, and closed the door on a world that had learned to listen. Morning broke clean and ordinary, which felt earned. Idris rode the bus with the folder light in his bag, the city moving past in practiced rhythms. At the terminal, the hangar doors were already open, work lights dimmed, the day settling into itself without spectacle. Aurelia stood near the labor corridor, not waiting, just present. She nodded when she saw him. A small acknowledgement that didn't ask for attention. The board approved the changes, she said when he passed. Unanimous. Good, Idris replied and kept walking. The auditors returned their final report before noon. Findings were clear, language precise, responsibility distributed instead of buried. When the press briefing followed, Aurelia stepped to the podium alone. Cameras flashed. She didn't smile. "We failed to listen," she said, voice steady. "That failure nearly cost lives." A murmur rippled. "We are correcting our systems, our culture, and ourselves." She paused. "And we will credit the people who keep us honest." A reporter asked about the joke, the one that had started it all. Aurelia didn't dodge. "It was wrong," she said. "It revealed a blind spot I'm responsible for." She looked into the lens. "Mockery is expensive." "We paid for it." The room went quiet. Idris watched from the corridor, mop resting against his shoulder, the place where power never looked now crowded with truth. He felt no urge to step forward. The words were enough. After, the hangar buzzed with a different energy, not relief exactly, alignment. Supervisors asked questions, mechanics answered, engineers listened. A new checklist went up by the door, handwritten additions taped beside laminated rules. Idris smiled and moved on. At lunch, the younger mechanic slid into the chair across from him. "They put you in the training module," he said, incredulous. "Listening, counting, not chasing alarms." Idris chewed, nodded. Good habits spread. "They called you a consultant," the mechanic added. Idris shrugged. "Call it what you want." That afternoon, the helicopter lifted again. No banners, no donors. Idris listened as it climbed, the sound on 4 clean and true. He counted anyway, habit and care entwined. It landed smoothly. Applause stayed in pockets. Aurelia found him later with a clipboard under her arm. "I walked the corridor," she said. "I learned names." "That's a start," Idris replied. She hesitated. "I wanted you to hear this from me." She held his gaze. "I won't make you invisible again." He considered her, the hangar, the city beyond. "Make the work visible," he said. "People will follow." She nodded, grateful for the direction. "Thank you." He finished his shift and clocked out on time. On the bus, his phone buzzed with a photo from school pickup. A spelling test with a star drawn too big. He smiled and typed back praise. At home, he cooked, fixed the chair leg one last turn, and folded a note for the morning. The folder sat unopened on the counter now, its decision already lived. Later, as dusk settled, news alerts chimed across the city. Not about heroes, about reforms, about listening, about a company changing because it had to. Idris stepped onto the balcony and listened to the city breathe. He felt the arc complete, not with triumph, but with balance. The joke had inverted itself. The laugh belonged to no one. Dignity remained. He went back inside, boots by the mat, lights low, ready for tomorrow. He paused by the window again, thinking about how quietly change announced itself when it was real. There would be meetings that drifted, habits that slipped, jokes that tried to come back dressed as nostalgia. He would listen for those too. Tomorrow night he would walk the corridor, count the sounds, answer questions without needing a title. In the morning he would pack a lunch, write a note, show up. That was the contract he kept. The rest was optional. It felt right that the victory didn't sparkle. It sat, solid and usable, like a tool returned to its place. He thought of the hangar at night, of hands that knew weight and torque, of voices learning when to stop talking. He thought of a child sleeping down the hall, trusting the world a little more. If change held, it would be because people chose it on ordinary days. He turned off the light, letting darkness do its honest work. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent and alive, while inside the apartment everything held. Idris set the alarm, placed the folder beneath the fridge magnet, and lay down without hurry. Tomorrow would arrive whether he chased it or not. He closed his eyes, listening, counting once more, satisfied with the sound. Sleep took him gently, carrying forward the promise that dignity, once restored, could endure beyond noise, cameras, and careless laughter. Until morning, ready, steady, listening. Again. Morning arrived without urgency, light slipping through the blinds and settling across the floor like it belonged there. Idris moved through the apartment quietly, packing lunch, folding a note, checking the chair leg out of habit more than need. The world felt steady, not because it was perfect, but because it was finally honest. He walked his daughter to school one last time before the weekend, listening to her chatter about plans and promises. At the gate, she hugged him and didn't let go right away. "You're smiling," she said, observant as ever. "So are you," he replied. It seemed to settle it. She ran off, backpack bouncing, trust intact. At the terminal, the hangar held its usual contrasts: polished glass and scuffed concrete, voices raised and voices missed. Idris took his place in the corridor, mop rolling beside him, ears open. He listened as machines woke, as people spoke, as the day found its rhythm. The helicopter lifted cleanly later, sound on 4 steady and true. He counted anyway, not because he had to, but because it mattered. Aurelia passed through the corridor again, clipboard tucked under her arm, nodding to people by name now. She didn't stop him, she didn't need to. The shift had locked in, quiet and durable. Power had learned where to look and where to step back. By afternoon, the terminal returned to ordinary noise. Not celebration, not fear, just work done properly. Idris clocked out on time and boarded the bus, city lights stitching together 1,000 unseen lives. He watched reflections blur in the window and thought about how close everything had come to breaking, and how little it took to keep it whole when listening began. At home, dinner was loud with laughter and stories. Afterward, Idris helped with homework, corrected spelling gently, praised effort honestly. When bedtime came, he tucked the blanket in just right and lingered in the doorway longer than necessary. Later, He stood by the fridge, the folder still held in place by a magnet shaped like a crooked star. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The decision lived in how he showed up, not what he signed. He stepped onto the balcony and let the night air cool his thoughts. Somewhere beyond the buildings, helicopters traced invisible paths, machines and people trusting one another to tell the truth. Somewhere else, a CEO learned to listen. Somewhere closer, a single dad kept promises. This had never been about proving someone wrong. It had been about proving something right. The joke that once echoed through a hangar had dissolved into silence, replaced by a better sound. The low, steady hum of dignity restored. Not loudly, not dramatically, permanently. Idris went back inside, boots by the mat, lights dimmed. Tomorrow would look like today. And that was enough. Before you go, tell me, what should the title of the next story be? Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad janitor was cleaning floors, then spoke Japanese to the silent CEO and stunned everyone. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?